Good afternoon, and welcome to A Glimpse of the Feminine. I'm your host, Tracy, and we're just going to jump right in and get to it today. This week, my Jay turns sweet 16. Not bad for a kid that was born dead, right? In honor of that, I want to share a little bit about his story, but I also want to share some ways that you can come alongside and help a family in crisis. So, Jay's story. I was about 22, 24 weeks pregnant when we learned that he had complex congenital heart defects. When the perinatologist saw the condition of his heart, we were sent over to the pediatric cardiology clinic immediately. Now, I know now that the urgency of that was an indicator of just how bad things were. But at the time, I thought it was just how they did things. At that initial appointment with the cardiology, we were told that he had Ebstein's anomaly and pulmonary atresia, and that he would likely die in utero. And I was devastated. We had lost a son at birth in 2004, and the prognosis for Jay sent me into a spiral. A month or two later, I realized that the baby that first really put CHDs on my personal radar had the same defect as Jay, and she'd passed away at 6 weeks. To say that I was a little panicky, yeah. But as I prayed, I felt Holy Spirit say, her story is not Jay's story, and everything's going to be okay. Now, people look at him now at 16 and say, well, see, everything was okay. But because of what we'd already been through as parents, I knew that God's okay might mean that we would bury our son. But I also knew if that was the path our feet were on, God would carry us and it would be okay. As the pregnancy progressed, doctors really wanted to schedule a C-section. But I really wanted to try for a natural birth. There's just so many benefits for a baby as they come through the birth canal, and I wanted him to have those benefits. And I knew that once he was born, everything was going to be out of my control. Not that it was really in my control anyway. But that aside, I knew that once he was born, we had no idea what was going to happen, and everything would be out of our hands for the most part. And so I felt like with his birth, that was one tiny thing that I could kind of have some say over and have some control. He actually went overdue, go figure. And he did really well. We were doing weekly non-stress tests and looking at him with ultrasound with the perinatologist every week. And he was doing really well until his birthday. And the ultrasound tech that we had most often was an older lady. And she would always, oh, look at his cute little feet, and look at those little hands, and look at his cute little kidneys. She was a delight. And we were in, and she was going through looking at the different systems and stuff, and then she got really quiet. And she was quiet for a little bit. And I finally looked at her and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Well, he's not practicing his breathing like he should be." And she was concerned. So she went and talked to the perinatologist, and they called over to the children's hospital where we were delivering, and we were sent over there because he needed to be born that day. We got in, we got settled in the labor room, and they broke my water. I'd been having a lot of prodromal contractions, but nothing that really sent me into labor. And so they broke my water, and I think I had maybe 1 or 2 contractions, and his heart rate tanked, like through the floor. And they started prepping me for a C-section before they got me to the, like they started there and they ran me to the OR. They debated on spinal or putting me out, and I said, "You put me out. I do not want to be awake for this." So they put me out, and they delivered a dead baby. The doctors were, with a lot of effort, were able to resuscitate him. And I told you earlier in the month when I was sharing a little bit of his story, his APGARs were 0 and 0. And by the time I saw him, he was sedated and intubated and hooked up to monitors and wires and tubes and all kinds of stuff. We entered a world that we never ever expected to enter. Never really even, I mean, you kind of know it exists, but you don't really even know it exists. So I want to talk about how we can support families with medically fragile children. It is difficult to know how to help someone when they are going through trauma. And I know in the past, I have felt at a loss as to how to help. We've told folks, "Hey, give us a call if you need anything." And I meant that when I said it. However, the reality is to expect someone who's dealing with traumatic issues to be the one to reach out. When we're in that position, often we don't even know what we need. So I'm going to share these things with the thought in mind that you should not expect much of anything from the family that's in crisis. If they're in crisis, they just need help. And, you know, when you're in crisis, you are in survival mode. And so you're just trying to get from this step to the next step to the next step. And to think of what you might need is overwhelming when there's so many urgent things right in front of your face. So these are suggestions. These are things that I wrote in a blog post when Jethro was maybe a toddler. And I think I wrote it when he was about a year old. And time fades the memory. So I went back to an old blog post I wrote and pulled some of those things because I wrote them when everything was fresh. So here are some suggestions. They certainly apply to families dealing with heart defects, but also to families dealing with cancer, with death, with any kind of critical or chronic illness, especially with a child. Parents need help. They need our support. It's hard enough when our kids are healthy, but when they aren't, it's really hard, especially if you don't have good support. So, first of all, be there. Call, email, send a card. Physically show up. Your presence means more than you can imagine. When Jay was just days old, 2 of my friends showed up at the NICU with a basket full of china, tea, and goodies. What a refreshing time it was. And it meant so much. You know, days in the hospital get long. Long. Now, you might want to call ahead just to make sure they aren't taking a needed break from the hospital, or at least be away from the room. But I was always so glad to see a visitor. I wish there would have been more. You know, even if you can only stay a few minutes, don't underestimate the value of your visit. And it doesn't just apply to when someone is in the hospital. Chronic or catastrophic illnesses, by nature, isolate us. Your existence is travel, doctor's appointments, and home. And probably groceries and, you know, those needed things, but you're combining them because you're making all these trips anyway. It doesn't leave a lot of time for anything else. Maybe if it's cancer, they can't have company. But you can still have contact and let them know that you are thinking about them. Don't assume they know. Don't expect someone who's dealing with hospitalizations, surgeries, learning new routines, dispensing meds, traveling back and forth to doctor's appointments on top of whatever else they had going on before to make the call. They're likely thinking of you. And they would probably have time to talk, but to expect them to initiate contact when their world has been upended, it's a little impractical. They're just trying to make it through the day, remembering everything they have to do. On the day of a surgery, if you cannot physically be there, and I don't know, we were doing all this pre-COVID, and I don't know how things have changed since then. But on the day of a surgery, if you can't be there, call, send an email. If you're both on Facebook, send a Facebook message letting them know that you're thinking about them or praying for them, sending positive vibes. If you have never turned your infant or child over to a surgeon for major surgery, I can't even explain to you what it's like. It's definitely an I have to trust God moment. With an open heart surgery, you know that they are going to be stopping your child's heart, putting them on bypass, chilling their body. Like, it is frightening when you stop and think about everything that's going to be happening to that child. To have support on that day is invaluable. But don't expect them to ask you to be there. I know folks are busy, and I know they have their own lives to live. I'm not going to impose on them by asking. I was so thankful for my dearest friend who came and just sat with me on the day of my son's Glenn. She asked ahead of time if I would like her to be there, giving me the freedom to say yes and know that it wasn't an imposition. And it made that day go so much faster, just to have her to sit with and visit and talk about normal, mundane things. Provide meals. Now, this may seem like a no-brainer. However, they may actually be needed later than you would think. Now, Jay was initially in the hospital for about 5.5 weeks. And our church family provided meals for my mom, who had the rest of the kids, so she didn't have to cook for so many extra mouths. And they offered when we got home, but I had been away from my family for over a month. And I just wanted some semblance of normalcy, to cook and to do laundry and all the other just normal family things. However, a couple of weeks down the road, now I'm overwhelmed with the new routine and multiple trips to town every week, which was an hour away. We had doctor's appointments, we had hospital visits, we had all these things going on, therapies, everything an hour away. Meals would have been so welcomed. But by that point, nobody was offering. And I didn't ask. For one thing, I don't know that I had the mental capacity to come up with the question, because I was in survival mode. And so we just struggled along. This is also very applicable when there is a death in the family, especially if that death is a child, no matter how old. Folks are great about providing meals right to start with, and that's wonderful. But if you've lost a child, you might really appreciate a meal months down the road, when the rest of the world has continued moving forward and you're still drowning in grief. When someone's in the hospital, if you can afford to give them even a small monetary gift, it is so appreciated. Now, our hospital was great about providing meal tickets for parents of children in the NICU or PICU. I don't know if they still do that, but at that time they did. But not all families are provided those. And even if they are, there's a daily limit. And honestly, if you're spending an extended amount of time in the hospital, you're going to want to get food from somewhere else. Once in a while anyway, hospital food gets old fast. Even if they can do the meals on a meal ticket, the little extras like vending machines or coffee adds up quickly. Along that line, take them a fruit basket so they have something healthy to munch on. Or give them a coffee card. It's so wonderful and appreciated. Our hospital has a local coffee company that set up a couple or 3 different coffee bars within the hospital compound. And I loved getting their coffee cards. If they're not in the hospital but making lots of trips to the doctor, you might think about giving them a gift card for gas, especially now with the price of gas. I don't even want to think about how much we spent on gas that first year. It was a lot. Having someone in the family with an illness can add up so many unexpected expenses. It's hard to even list them all. If they have other children at home, then bringing the children up to the hospital is great. Don't spend time telling mom and dad how much their other kids need them. Because you know what? They know that. All you are doing is creating unnecessary guilt, adding to the guilt they already are feeling for not being at home. But even a sedated newborn needs their mama and daddy there. An infant or even a toddler who cannot talk needs someone to advocate for them and to keep track of what's being done. As much as we don't like to think about it or consider it, mistakes happen. And often it's mom or dad's sharp eye that catches it before it's too late. They need to be with their infant. If you've never had a child in the hospital, that's hard to understand. I knew my other children needed me, but I also knew that they were surrounded by family and friends that loved them and were caring for them. Jay needed me to be there watching over him. And I had somebody tell me how much my other kids needed me and I really should be at home for them. And like I knew that, but I also, like I said, I knew they were being loved. I knew they were being supported. I knew they were being cared for. And that woman didn't work outside the home. She could have easily brought my kids up to spend a few hours with me at the hospital, and they could have seen their little brother as well. Instead of giving me a guilt trip, she could have actually been helpful. Giving support to parents and reinforcing to the kids that they are only away because they have to be, not because they want to be, that's a gift. We were overjoyed when someone would bring the other children up to visit and wished it could have happened more often. But once again, not something I felt comfortable asking for because folks were already doing so much to help. Now, not everyone has this ability, but some folks can just observe another's life and know what needs to be done. This can be a blessing for a family in crisis. As I've already said, it can be hard to know what's needed. Like if I am in crisis, please don't ask me what I need because my mind is just going to do like a juke and jive and come up with nothing probably. But showing up unexpectedly with a meal or offering to drive to a doctor's appointment or a myriad of other things without being asked, these are gifts to the family. Families going through trauma need a lot of support. And they may not be able to reciprocate much, if at all. Depending on what's going on, they may have all they can do just to stay afloat mentally, emotionally, and even physically. That doesn't mean that down the road things aren't going to be more stable and the relationships will get back to normal, whatever that is. Honestly, if folks didn't make the effort to at least stay in contact with me during the worst of all of that time, that first year, by the time things settled down and I could catch my breath and think about something besides Jay and the rest of the family's needs, I kind of figured they were gone. And I had so much on my plate. I was not pursuing relationships with people who were not interested. It's fine, right? We move on. God's sovereign and He knows what's best. And I trust that. I know I'm asking you to step up and take the initiative, to be giving and self-sacrificing. But if we're Christians, isn't that what God asks us to do? And if we're not, isn't that just being a good human? Aren't we supposed to step in beside those who are hurting and do what we can to ease their burden? Now, I know I've failed to do that in the past, mostly because I just didn't know how to help. I didn't understand. I'm not fussing about how things were done for us because we were very blessed. God's provided through all the years. Community, outstanding people who will come alongside. People will support and help. But I did want to share from my perspective what was helpful and some of what was not. Ultimately, ask, but not in a general, what do you need sort of way, but ask specific questions. It's so much easier to answer something that has been specifically asked. So it's one thing to go, well, if you need anything, let me know. And most people that say that genuinely mean it. But maybe instead of saying, if you need something, let me know, or, so what do you need? That is such a broad question. But if they're at the hospital, maybe, do you want the kids brought up? Just for an hour or two, I could bring them up for you. You'd have a little bit of chance to visit with them. Most hospitals do have a sizable waiting area. Our children's hospital has a large waiting area outside of the NICU. And it was a good place for families to be able to spend some time together. Do you need this? Do you need that? I want to be able to help you. If you need this, please don't tell me no. Being specific makes it so much easier. Do you want me to be there for the surgery? I'll come and sit with you. you guys are having a meeting with your doctor to discuss surgical options, do you want to just sit down with a cup of coffee when you're done? These things, they may take a little bit of thought process on our part to come up with a specific, but it makes it so much easier for the people who are in crisis and just trying to survive. And it really doesn't take that much effort on our part to be helpful. When your brain is overwhelmed with tons of information and emotions are running high, I mentioned in the last episode where I talked about congenital heart defects. You know, I was post-surgical, I was postpartum. We were being given lots and lots of information. If you have a critically ill child at birth, you are thrown into the deep end. And even if you've done research beforehand, you have no idea what you're in for once that baby's born. So you've got all these emotions, you've got all this information, you're exhausted. You can't necessarily answer a general question, but a specific question, yes or no, is so much easier than, well, I think we might need, could you bring the kids up? I don't know. And if you ask them a specific question and they say, oh, I don't know, they probably just don't want to feel like they're imposing. So do it anyway. Take a chance. Take a chance and be a blessing. You can do it. I've given several different suggestions for helping out families. I always want whatever I have gone through in my life to be able to help somebody else. I've never really been a person that will like open up and let you see the me inside of everything, but I've always been someone who would share life experience, especially if I thought it would help somebody else. And we struggled a lot. It took me probably 4 years to really feel like I kind of had my feet back under me after Jay was born. We had a lot go on that first year. And then within the next few years, had a couple more babies. So there was some extenuating circumstances. But a parent who has a medically fragile child is not going to be on an even keel for a while. It takes time to learn all the things you have to learn. I mean, just dispensing regular medications, but maybe they have to take care of an NG tube and learn how to place it if it gets pulled out. Maybe they have to learn how to take care of a G tube. Maybe they have to give injections to their baby. They're learning about oxygen and feeding tubes and feeding, oh my gosh, my brain just stopped. the pumps, the feeding pumps, and they're learning all these things and trying to fit all of this into their life. I'm thankful. I've been a parent for a long time before Jay was born, so I wasn't trying to figure out parenting on top of the rest of it. I was mostly trying to figure out the medical, but it still had to be folded into our life and at some point hit normalcy. There are lots of parents out there that their heart baby or their other medically fragile child is their first child. So they're trying to learn all this medical stuff, which is a really steep learning curve. And they're trying to figure out how to parent. And it's hard if it's your first baby because you don't know what just normal with a baby looks like. What's a normal baby stuff and what's medically related baby stuff. And sometimes it can be hard to tell. So if you have somebody in your life that has a baby with CHDs or spina bifida or cerebral palsy or whatever, when the myriad of medical problems that a baby can be born with, oh man, please extend grace to them. Please support them. You don't know how much just the thinking about you text. Gosh dang it, you're in my thoughts today. I don't know what it's like to spend the day in the hospital with a baby, but I imagine it's hard. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you today. Or maybe you do know. And you could share something that helped you during those times. Let's love on these families. Let's show them support. Because these kids are amazing. The resilience of kids who have a hard start is amazing. And they are such a blessing. But mom and dad are overwhelmed, especially in the beginning. So that's today's episode. I hope that there's something helpful in here. Some of these things translate to families without kids that are in crisis. Maybe it's the husband in the hospital or the wife, or, a death of a parent. These things can be used for lots of different crisis situations. So, I hope you find something here that you can take and you can use to help somebody else, to be supportive for somebody else. And I hope that you have a great week. And until next time.